So let's talk about nesting and why nesting can help you keep your timeline clean. It can also automate to quite a reasonable degree. It can get you around adding filter problems where you try and add a filter and for some reason it just won't even start, or it gives you an error message. And then also mention why you can use it for sort of applying audio effects, but there are better ways of doing it. So let's talk about automation, because this is probably one of the things I use the most in projects. I get a lot of clients, they have a particular style that's been designed and approved by their designers, and so they kind of want you to stick to it. But equally, these designers are forever changing things. And if you do things the traditional way, which is you create transitions or introductions as a standalone event, if you like, along the timeline, then you end up having to edit every single one of these throughout the project. And some of the educational stuff I do can be up to 20 or 30 minutes long. It may have 40 or 50 of these different little interval breaks, if you like, and that can be really time consuming to update. So how I approach this, let's imagine here we've got a very basic transition, which is basically if we look at these different elements, we've got a block underneath here, which is using the tint, which just follows different colors. So it goes from blue to purple to white. And then we've just got text at the top, and the text has a mask that travels across, and then the other one's just got a fade, and they also change scale. So really simple. Now the trouble is, if I now decide, okay, I'm going to scatter this is going to be our default break between each little bit, and I'm going to press my Alt key and I'm going to duplicate it, and there we go, bing, we've got our little break again. This is fantastic. And then the design department say to you, okay, we don't like the word section. It's now company policy that this is now part. So you click in here, change it to part. That one's done. You think, great. And then, of course, you go on to this one and it's still the next section. So you're going to have to change this separately. So what we do is go back to the beginning of this one, select it all. We then go clip and we go nest. And we'll call this default section break, and there it is. Now what happens if we hold down our Alt key, click and drag? So we've got our new break here, got two exactly the same. Now let's change the first one again, and we'll change it back to segment. And then click off it, go back to here. So that says segment, go to this one, and it's now says segment. And of course you could add a little logo in this one as well. If we add another track, for the sake of simplicity, I will just draw something. So let's draw a little circle. So let's pretend that this is their logo, and that's just been added. And then we go back to nesting, go back here, and the logo's there as well. Let's suppose we want to animate. And if we weren't in a nesting clip, we'd have to animate every single layer and every single item, which means if we wanted this whole clip to slide across and then slide out, we'd have to do this on everything, which is really time consuming. So now that we've got it in here, we can very easily click your stopwatch, move this across, move this back, and then go to where we want it to go out to. Move that across, maybe give it a bit more time so it's more obvious. Now when we run this, you will notice that it slides across, does its thing, and then it slides out, which is brilliant. Now this is going to be a default transition that ties across. Then if I Alt and drag this, it all works fine. However, if they say, actually, we want it to come in from the right, so go back to our beginning, let's scoot it over. So we scoot it over, and then it comes back out. What we'll notice is, of course, this one is still doing the original. So there's nothing to stop you getting this one and nesting it again. Okay, and then, so that's coming in from the right, we're now going to Alt and click, and you'll notice that the other one has also done it. If I change this to come from the top, so let's take that out, and we're now going to come down from the top, you'll notice that all of them are coming down from the top. So you can see how this works. So anything that's standard, so this could be disclaimers, it could be introductory paragraph, it could be legal wording, anything that tends to be the same but can be updated and reflects across the project, I would definitely nest it. So let's talk about another use, which is basically uncluttering your timeline or making it cleaner or easier to manage. With long projects, it can be very difficult to see where you are. So this is why you must always label things very clearly. And you can use that by inserting blank video up here and naming the video and then color coding it. Remember, any of this video, you can right click and you can label and you can change it to different colors. And really it is a good discipline to get into. It makes things an awful lot easier to find. But taking this little guided tour as an example, supposing we wanted to divide this house into rooms, what we can do is just select this lot, and then we can go exactly as before, clip, nest, and we can say kitchen. And there we have one very, very simple layer. And then if we want to change anything within it, we just double click and we can move along and we can do whatever we want, and all is well. That kind of makes complete sense. And remember, you can change the color of the nest. So the kitchen could be, let's think, something violent. Okay. Well, that's not very violent, is it? Okay, let's say the kitchen could be violet. And then when you do the utility room, clip, nest, utility room, that can either stay the same color or you can color it something else and so forth. And it becomes then very easy to scan the timeline and see the distinct sections. That one's the same color as the others. Lavender, there we go. It becomes very easy to then to scan along and you see exactly where the sections begin and end. It also means that if the client says, actually, I want the utility room after the kitchen, as with grouping clips, it becomes very easy to then move them up. And now we've reversed the order with virtually no hassle, which is great. So that's another use. And there's also other ones. You'll notice with Adobe Premiere that as you use it, you'll get little glitches and bugs. You'll get things like you'll go to apply a filter and it'll say it can't do it. Or you've done something already. For example, with this clip, we've already changed the time on it. We decide that we want to then add a warp stabilizer. So we get a warp stabilizer and then lo and behold, it'll come up and say warp stabilizer cannot be used because the speed has already been adjusted. So at this point, it'd be easy just to give up and think, okay, I just can't use it. But you can, you absolutely can. So let's go back to effects. Let's take off the warp stabilizer. And all we have to do is nest this one. And when you nest it, it becomes its own clip, its own sequence, which means it's like a first instance. So whatever you've applied on it has basically been normalized, if you like, which means now when you go to your warp stabilizer and you put it on, it'll just apply like normal. And so remember, if you get an effect, you try and apply it, doesn't like it, nest the clip, then apply the effect. Organization wise in your project, I would always recommend having a project folder called NESTS, because they have the same icon as a sequence, because ultimately they're just another sequence. So call this NESTS, and you can see now why it's a good idea to label these in such a way that they make sense, because otherwise it just says nested sequence 03, 04, 05, and you've got no clue what's in them. So I'd say default intro, segment intro, and then put that in the nests. And then when you're searching for something, you kind of know where it is. And you've got a little preview up here anyway, so you can kind of see what it is. But this means you'll probably find it quicker. And it also means when you use your keyword searches up here, it'll drag it out. Organization is everything. Now then, talking about audio. So with audio, it is possible that you can have all your audio clips on the timeline and you want to apply a normalization filter. So you select your files and you go clip and nest, and we'll call this audio. You lose your waveform, which is a bit of a pain. You also have to double click to resync anything. It makes it very hard to then realign stuff with the timeline. But basically, you want to be looking at applying a submix. And I've done one here, which is you just add submix track. Right click at the bottom of your audio stack, right click, add submix track. And then what you can do then is you can route your audio track, this is track 1 for example, through your submix, and then apply the effects to the submix, which then get applied universally to whatever track, or all tracks, whichever tracks you route to the submix. And that's a much better way of working. It's like a send and return on a mixing desk. Just means everything gets funneled through that, but you still get the ability, of course, to line up your sound and change stuff and chop bits out and all the rest without having to jump into a nest, which would be really counterintuitive, and it would be a real production stumbling block. Anyway, I hope this is all useful. Start nesting. It's a great thing to do, and it'll make your workflow a lot easier than before.